Chapter 1. The Man Who Stepped In. Ricardo was 33 the year he met Marta. He liked to think of himself as steady. Not flashy. Not loud. Just dependable. He worked as a logistics supervisor for a distribution company on the outskirts of the city. Long hours, predictable routines, honest pay. He rented a modest one-bedroom apartment with beige walls and second-hand furniture. His life was orderly, quiet, and, if he were honest, a little lonely. He met Marta at a co-worker's birthday dinner. She arrived late, apologizing softly, one hand gripping a small purse, the other resting protectively on the shoulder of a thin little girl with serious eyes. "This is my daughter, Letitia," she said. Letitia didn't say anything. She simply stepped behind her mother's leg and held onto the fabric of her dress as if it were armor. Ricardo noticed that first, the way the girl scanned the room as though calculating danger. He also noticed the shadows under Marta's eyes. Not the kind that came from lack of sleep for one night, but the kind that came from years of carrying everything alone. "You don't have to stay long." Ricardo heard Marta whisper to her daughter. "We'll leave soon." That sentence stayed with him. The way she said it, like someone who never stayed anywhere too long. When Ricardo introduced himself, he crouched slightly so he wouldn't tower over the child. "Hi, Letitia," he said gently. "I like your shoes." They were bright red with tiny silver stars on the sides. She glanced down at them, then back at him suspicious. "My mom bought them," she replied. "They're good at picking cool shoes," Ricardo said with a small smile. Letitia didn't smile back, but she didn't retreat further either. That was the first crack in the wall. Later that night, while other guests laughed loudly over drinks, Ricardo found himself sitting beside Marta at the edge of the table. Letitia had fallen asleep with her head against her mother's arm. "She gets tired easily," Marta said quietly, brushing hair from her daughter's face. "It's just the two of us." Ricardo nodded. He didn't ask about the father. He didn't need to. The absence was sitting right there between them. "She's lucky," he said after a moment. Marta looked at him, surprised. "Lucky to have someone who stays." Marta didn't respond immediately, but something in her expression softened. That night, when Ricardo returned to his apartment, he didn't turn on the television. He sat on the edge of his bed and thought about the little girl hiding behind her mother's dress. He thought about the exhaustion in Marta's posture. And for the first time in years, his quiet apartment felt emptier than usual. He didn't call it love yet, but he felt something take root. Their relationship moved slowly. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend park walks where Letitia rode her small bicycle while Ricardo jogged alongside her, pretending to struggle to keep up. "Faster," she'd shout. "I'm trying," he'd laugh, exaggerating his breathing. "You're too fast for me." Marta would watch from a bench, arms folded, cautious but hopeful. The first time Letitia allowed him to tie her shoelaces without pulling away, Ricardo felt absurdly proud. He never tried to replace anyone. He never forced affection. He simply showed up. When Marta's car broke down one rainy evening, Ricardo left work early to pick them up. Letitia sat in the back seat, clutching her backpack. "Mom says cars are expensive," she muttered. "They can be," Ricardo replied. "But that's okay. We'll fix it." The word we slipped out naturally. Letitia didn't correct him. By the time they married a year later, Ricardo had already memorized Letitia's school schedule. He knew which mornings she had spelling tests and which afternoons she had art club. He knew she hated tomatoes but loved strawberry yogurt. He began picking her up from school 3 days a week. At first, she waited a few feet away from him at the gate. "Your mom's working late," he'd say. "I'm on driver duty." She would nod, wordless, and climb into the car. Eventually, she started talking during the drive home. "Emma says her dad lets her watch scary movies." "Oh yeah," Ricardo replied. "What kind of scary movies?" "The ones with ghosts." "Well," he said thoughtfully, "we'll start with cartoons. Then maybe ghosts when you're 30. She giggled. That giggle became his favorite sound. Evenings turned into routines. Homework at the kitchen table. Ricardo reviewing math problems with exaggerated seriousness. 2 plus 8, he'd ask. 10. Are you sure? I was thinking 11. She'd roll her eyes. No, Ricardo. He pretended to be defeated. You're right. I need to study more. At bedtime, He would sit at the edge of her bed reading stories. His voice changed for every character, deep for dragons, squeaky for mice. Again, she'd whisper when he closed the book. One more page, he'd bargain. When she scraped her knee falling off her bike one Saturday, she didn't run to her mother first. She ran to him. "It hurts," she cried, tears streaking her cheeks. Ricardo carried her inside, cleaned the wound carefully, blew on it as if that could erase the pain. "You're brave," he told her. "I didn't cry that much," she sniffed. "You cried exactly the right amount." Marta watched from the doorway, eyes shining. "You didn't have to take this on," she told him that night after Letitia had fallen asleep. Ricardo shook his head. "I wanted to," and he meant it. Responsibility became his language of love. He started taking double shifts, overtime on weekends. He tracked every expense in a spreadsheet. He cut back on new clothes, skipped vacations, packed lunches instead of eating out. When Letitia showed interest in piano after seeing a recital at school, Ricardo found a teacher and rearranged his schedule to drive her twice a week. At her first recital, she sat stiffly on the bench, fingers trembling above the keys. The room was small, filled with folding chairs and polite applause. Ricardo sat in the front row. "You'll do great," he whispered before she went on stage. She played slowly, missing one note in the middle. Her eyes darted toward him. He smiled and gave her a thumbs up. When she finished, he stood and clapped louder than anyone else. On the drive home, she said quietly, "I messed up." "No," Ricardo said. "You kept going. That's what matters." She stared out the window, absorbing that. Years passed in small, steady increments. Rent felt temporary. Instability felt dangerous. So Ricardo saved aggressively. Every bonus, every overtime check. He met with a realtor. He studied mortgage rates late at night while Marta and Letitia slept. "I found something," he told Marta one evening, spreading papers across the kitchen table. She looked nervous. "Is it too much?" "It's manageable," he said calmly. 2 bedrooms. Good school district. "For us?" she asked. "For you," he corrected gently. "For both of you." The apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was solid. Sunlight in the mornings. A small balcony. Space for a piano by the living room wall. The deed was in his name. The mortgage was his responsibility. Not because he didn't trust them, but because he believed protection meant carrying weight quietly. The day they moved in, Letitia ran from room to room. "Is this really ours?" she asked. Ricardo looked at Marta before answering. "It's home," he said. That night, after boxes were unpacked and the city lights glowed outside their balcony, Ricardo stood alone in the hallway and listened to the faint sound of Letitia humming in her new bedroom. He felt tired. He felt proud. He felt necessary. Love, he believed, was proven through action. Sacrifice built loyalty. Consistency built belonging. He turned off the hallway light and allowed himself one small, hopeful thought as he walked toward his own room. One day she'll call me Dad. Chapter 2, 18 Years of Giving. Time did not pass in dramatic leaps. It moved quietly, in report cards and rent payments, in growing shoe sizes and increasing tuition invoices, in birthday candles that multiplied faster than Ricardo expected. 18 years. Sometimes he would look up from the kitchen table, where he always paid the bills, and realize another year had slipped by. Private school tuition came first. "I don't want her in public school," Marta had said when Letitia was 10, folding laundry in the living room. "She deserves better opportunities." Ricardo had nodded before she even finished. "How much is it?" he asked. When she told him, he felt the number land in his chest like a small stone. But he didn't let it show. "We'll make it work," he replied. And he did. Overtime became normal. Saturday shifts stopped feeling optional. He learned to calculate expenses in his head while brushing his teeth. He stopped buying coffee on the way to work. He delayed replacing his old car even when the engine began making a tired, metallic rattle. Every month, he transferred the tuition payment without fail. Letitia rarely mentioned it, but he attended every parent-teacher meeting. "She's bright," one teacher told him. "A little distant sometimes, but very capable." Ricardo smiled. "She's always been thoughtful." Marta would squeeze his hand under the desk. "Thank you," she would whisper on the drive home. Those 2 words were enough then. Piano lessons continued for years. New instructors. Recitals in larger halls. Sheet music scattered across the living room. Do you think I'm good? Letitia asked him once at 13, arms folded, defensive. I think you're disciplined, he answered honestly. And that's better. She seemed satisfied with that. Vacations followed, modest at first. Beach trips, a rented cabin near the mountains. Later, when his income rose slightly, flights to different cities. In photographs, Ricardo often stood slightly to the side, camera in hand. Come in the picture, he'd say. No, Marta laughed. You take the best ones. He didn't argue. He liked being the one who made things happen. When Letitia turned 18 and was accepted into a prestigious university, Ricardo felt an almost overwhelming pride. She got in, Marta said breathlessly, waving the acceptance letter. She got in. Letitia stood in the doorway, trying to look composed but failing. It's expensive, she murmured. Ricardo took the letter from Marta and scanned it carefully. It's worth it, he said. The tuition nearly took his breath away. Over 4 years, it would total close to $80,000, not including housing, books, and living expenses. He didn't hesitate publicly. Privately, he recalculated his retirement plans. You don't have to, Letitia began one evening, almost uncertain. I know, he interrupted gently, but I want to. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said. He held on to that thank you for years. University changed her. When he helped move her in her dorm, he carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs while she chatted excitedly with new friends. This is Ricardo, she said casually to a girl arranging posters on the wall. My mom's husband. The words were light, effortless. Ricardo felt them anyway. He kept smiling. Nice to meet you, he said, extending his hand. Later, as he assembled a small desk lamp in her room, he told himself not to be sensitive. She was young. Labels didn't matter. He continued paying tuition, wiring rent when she moved off campus, covering groceries when she overspent. Dad, she started once over the phone, then corrected herself quickly. Ricardo, can you send a little extra this month? I had to buy textbooks. The pause between the two names echoed long after the call ended. Of course, he sent the money. Marta never returned to work. At first, it made sense. Letitia needed supervision. The household needed managing. But as the years went by, the reasons faded. You could do something part-time, Ricardo suggested gently one evening. Marta stiffened. Are you saying I don't contribute? No, he said quickly. I just thought maybe you'd enjoy it. She shook her head. You earn enough. The conversation ended there. He carried the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. He paid for Letitia's car when she turned 21. It's too much, she protested weakly. It's practical, he insisted. You need transportation. He noticed that gratitude had become shorter, briefer, almost procedural. Father's Day grew quieter over time. When Letitia was young, she made handmade cards at school, bright construction paper with uneven letters. As a teenager, she stopped mentioning it altogether. One year, when she was 20, Ricardo walked into the kitchen to find Marta setting the table. Are we doing anything today? He asked casually. For what? She replied. He hesitated. It's Sunday. She blinked, then looked away. Oh, there was no card, no cake, no acknowledgement. He told himself it wasn't important. He wasn't her biological father. He shouldn't expect anything. But expectations had never required biology. They had grown quietly from years of bedtime stories and scraped knees. The graduation came without warning. At least, that was how it felt. He learned about the ceremony from social media. A photograph appeared on his screen while he sat at his desk during lunch break. Letitia in a cap and gown. Marta beside her, crying proudly. The caption read, "We did it. We." Ricardo stared at the image until the screen dimmed. He checked his messages. No invitation. No reminder. He scrolled further. More photos. Friends. Flowers. A dinner celebration. His chest felt hollow. That evening, when Letitia called, her voice was bright. It was so chaotic, she laughed. You wouldn't believe the crowd. He swallowed carefully. I saw the pictures. Oh, she said. A brief pause. Yeah, it was last-minute tickets. He nodded even though she couldn't see him. I'm proud of you. Thanks, she replied quickly. Anyway, I have to run. The call ended. Ricardo sat in the dark living room long after. Each slight, taken alone, seemed harmless. My mom's husband, a missed Father's Day, an unspoken graduation, tiny cuts, but over 18 years, they layered over one another. He kept telling himself patience was love. Gratitude took time. Young people were distracted. She would understand one day. He repeated these thoughts the way others recited prayers. Yet sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was silent and Marta had already gone to bed, Ricardo would sit at the kitchen table and stare at the old recital programs he had kept in a drawer. He had been there for every milestone, every payment cleared, every bill covered, every safety net secured. He had given without counting. But for the first time in 18 years, a quiet, unfamiliar question rose inside him. Had he mistaken responsibility for belonging? Chapter 3, The Engagement Announcement. The announcement came on a Sunday afternoon. Ricardo had just finished repairing the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet when the front door burst open and Letitia walked in without knocking, her voice bright, breathless. "Mom, where are you?" Marta hurried from the bedroom, wiping her hands on a towel. "What happened?" Letitia held up her left hand. A diamond caught the light. For a second, no one spoke. Then Marta gasped. "Oh my God." Ricardo stood slowly, the screwdriver still in his hand. "You're engaged?" Letitia laughed, nodding rapidly. "Raphael proposed last night, at the rooftop restaurant downtown." Marta rushed forward, grabbing her daughter's hands, examining the ring from every angle. "It's beautiful." Ricardo stepped closer. "Congratulations." Letitia looked at him then, smiling, a wide, radiant smile he hadn't seen in a long time. "Thanks." Raphael appeared in the doorway behind her, one hand casually tucked into his jacket pocket. "Sir," he said with a short nod. Ricardo extended his hand. "Congratulations." Raphael's handshake was brief, firm but distant. "It's a simple ring for now," Raphael added. "We'll upgrade later." Ricardo's eyes flicked toward the diamond again. It was modest, nothing extravagant. "That's not necessary," Marta said quickly. Letitia shrugged. "We'll see." Ricardo smiled. "If there's anything you need," the sentence hung in the air like it always did. "Anything you need." The ring was upgraded 2 weeks later. It wasn't Raphael who suggested it. It was Letitia. They were sitting at the dining table going over early wedding ideas when she said casually, "The jeweler said we could trade it in and pay the difference for something a little more impressive." Raphael looked uncomfortable. "It's fine the way it is." Letitia tilted her head. "It's our engagement ring." Marta turned toward Ricardo. "What do you think?" Ricardo cleared his throat. "If you want something you'll love long term, it makes sense to choose carefully." Letitia's eyes softened. "Really? Of course," he said. "Let's go look at options." The upgrade cost more than Raphael had anticipated. Ricardo covered it quietly. At the jewelry store, Letitia admired a larger stone, holding her hand under the display lights. "This one," she whispered. Raphael glanced at the price tag and swallowed. Ricardo noticed. "I'll handle the difference," Ricardo said evenly. Raphael opened his mouth, then closed it. "I appreciate that." Letitia wrapped her arms around Ricardo in a quick, impulsive hug. "Thank you." It was brief, but it was enough for him to feel needed again. The engagement dinner became Letitia's idea. "We should celebrate properly," she said one evening, scrolling through venues on her phone. "Not just something small at home." "Of course," Marta agreed. "This is important." Ricardo nodded. "How many guests?" "Maybe 30, Letitia said. "Close friends. Family. Family." He liked how that sounded. He booked the venue himself, an elegant private dining hall with warm lighting and polished wood floors. He met with the manager twice, reviewed menu options, selected wine packages, paid the deposit without mentioning the total, $5,000. Then more, once decorations and floral arrangements were added. "It looks incredible," Marta said softly the night he showed her the layout plans. She stood beside him in the kitchen, fingertips grazing his arm. "You always take care of everything." He smiled. "It's what I do." But when guests asked about the dinner plans in the following weeks, Marta answered differently. "Letitia and I have been planning something special," she would say. Ricardo stood nearby, listening. Letitia did the same. My mom and I decided on a classic theme, she told a friend over the phone one afternoon. Ricardo was in the living room, assembling a shelf. He paused at the phrase, my mom and I. He waited for his name to follow. It didn't. Raphael began visiting more frequently. He was polite, but there was a quiet dismissal in the way he spoke to Ricardo. Sir, do you mind if we borrow the car? He'd ask. Or, Sir, could you transfer that amount for the vendor? Never, Ricardo. Never anything warmer. One evening, as wedding invitations were being discussed, Ricardo suggested, should we include your old piano teacher? She might like to see you. Letitia barely looked up from her phone. I don't think that's necessary. Raphael nodded in agreement. We're keeping it streamlined. Ricardo felt himself receding in the room, like furniture no one noticed anymore. Still, he pushed the feeling aside. This is normal, he told himself. She's building her own life. The week of the engagement dinner arrived quickly. Ricardo collected the suits from the dry cleaner, confirmed the catering numbers, double-checked the seating arrangement. He even rehearsed a short toast in his mind, something simple, dignified. He imagined saying how proud he was, how he had watched her grow, how love required commitment. He imagined applause. He imagined her looking at him with gratitude. On the afternoon of the dinner, he stood in the bedroom adjusting his tie when Marta entered. You look handsome, she said. He smiled faintly. Nervous? A little, she admitted. Then she stepped closer. Thank you for doing all this. He searched her face. You're welcome. You've always supported her, she added quietly. Always. He held on to that word. The venue glowed under soft golden lights when they arrived. Round tables dressed in ivory cloth. Crystal glasses catching reflections. A small stage area near the front for speeches. Letitia walked in wearing a pale blue dress, her upgraded rings sparkling as she greeted guests. Raphael stayed at her side, one hand resting at the small of her back. Ricardo moved from table to table, shaking hands. Congratulations, people told him. Thank you, he replied automatically. But he noticed something else. When Letitia introduced him to Raphael's extended family, she said, This is Ricardo. No title, no context, just a name. One of Raphael's uncles asked, And you are? There was a brief hesitation. He's my mom's husband, Letitia answered lightly. Ricardo felt the words land like a quiet echo from years ago. He nodded politely. Dinner was served. Laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked. From across the hall, Ricardo watched Letitia moving between guests, radiant and confident. He studied her face, the same eyes that once searched for him in recital halls. He told himself not to overthink small things. Tonight was about celebration. Tonight was about family. And as he took his seat near the front, adjusting his cufflinks and glancing at the small stage prepared for speeches, a fragile hope rose inside him. This is my moment to finally feel like family. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. All right, everyone, he announced with a smile. Let's begin the toasts. Chapter 4, The Toast. The room was warm with candlelight and the low hum of celebration. 30 guests filled the private hall, polished glasses, folded linen napkins, soft music playing beneath the rise and fall of conversation. Laughter traveled easily between tables. Champagne shimmered in tall flutes. The air smelled of roasted herbs and expensive wine. Ricardo sat near the front, jacket buttoned, hands folded loosely in his lap. He had chosen this venue. He had paid for the flowers, white lilies and pale roses arranged in crystal vases. He had approved the wine list, upgraded the dessert selection, even adjusted the lighting after visiting the hall the previous week. He watched Letitia from across the room. She looked radiant, confident. The diamond on her finger caught the candlelight every time she lifted her hand. Raphael stood beside her, smiling at guests, one arm resting possessively at her waist. Ricardo felt something fragile but hopeful inside his chest. The master of ceremonies lifted a glass and tapped a spoon gently against it. Ladies and gentlemen, he said cheerfully, if we could have your attention for the engagement toast. The room softened into quiet anticipation. Marta squeezed Letitia's hand and whispered something in her ear. Letitia nodded and stepped toward the small stage area, taking the microphone. Ricardo straightened slightly in his chair. This is it, he thought. Letitia cleared her throat, smiling. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice steady and bright. It means so much to see the people who've shaped my life gathered in one place. Light applause followed. She turned first toward Marta. Mom, she said, her tone softening, you've been my rock since the beginning. You raised me alone. You sacrificed everything for me. Every late night, every struggle, you carried it. Marta's eyes filled instantly with tears. You showed me what strength looks like, Letitia continued. You taught me independence. You're the reason I stand here today. Guests murmured approvingly. A few dabbed at their eyes. Ricardo nodded slowly. Yes, he thought. She deserves this recognition. Letitia turned toward Raphael next. And Raphael, she said, smiling at him, you walked into my life when I least expected it. You showed me love that feels safe and exciting at the same time. You chose me. Raphael stepped closer, squeezing her hand. I can't wait to build a future with you, she finished, her voice glowing with certainty. More applause. Glasses lifted. Ricardo felt his pulse quicken slightly. There was still time. She scanned the room now. I also want to thank my real family, she added. Real family. The phrase brushed past him gently, almost unnoticeable. She listed cousins, an aunt, a childhood friend who had helped her through exams. Ricardo waited. The microphone shifted slightly in her hand. She took a small breath. Then her eyes moved. They found him. The room seemed to narrow to a single point. She looked directly at him, not past him, not around him. At him. Her smile changed. It wasn't playful. It wasn't affectionate. It was calm, deliberate. You know, she said slowly, there's something else I've wanted to say for a long time. Ricardo felt his spine stiffen. The room leaned forward collectively. You know what I want most? She continued, her gaze never leaving his. A small, uncertain laugh fluttered from somewhere in the back of the hall. For you to disappear from our lives forever. Silence. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. Complete silence. The kind that hums in your ears. For a second, Ricardo thought he had misheard her. The words echoed strangely, as if they had been spoken underwater. Disappear. From our lives. Forever. No one laughed. No one clapped. No one moved. Ricardo felt the blood drain from his face. He did not blink. He did not breathe. His hands, resting on the tablecloth, tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned his head slowly. Marta. She was looking at Letitia first. Then she looked at him, and she smiled. A small smile. Subtle, but unmistakable. And then she nodded. Not a hesitant gesture. Not confusion. Agreement. That was the moment something inside Ricardo cracked. Not at Letitia's words, but at Marta's nod. 18 years. Every bill. Every late shift. Every recital. Every scraped knee. Every tuition payment. Every mortgage installment. Every quiet sacrifice. All of it condensed into that single nod. Guests shifted uncomfortably now. Someone coughed. A fork clinked against a plate. Raphael said nothing. Letitia lowered the microphone slowly, still watching him. Ricardo felt his chest tighten, as if an invisible band had been pulled around it. But he did not stand. He did not shout. He did not ask why. He did not defend himself. Instead, he reached calmly for his champagne glass. His hand trembled only slightly. He lifted it, took one slow sip. The liquid tasted metallic. He set the glass down with careful precision. The master of ceremonies laughed nervously. Well, he said weakly, to new beginnings. A few guests forced applause, uncertain whether they were witnessing a joke or something else entirely. Ricardo pushed his chair back quietly. No one stopped him. He walked toward the front desk of the venue where the manager stood frozen. I'll take care of the final bill, Ricardo said evenly. The manager blinked. Of course, sir. The total was higher than expected. Extra bottles opened. Additional desserts ordered. Ricardo handed over his card. He signed without reading the receipt. Everything satisfactory? The manager asked cautiously. Yes, Ricardo replied. His voice was steady. He returned to the hall briefly. Marta was whispering urgently to Letitia now. Raphael looked irritated. Ricardo did not approach them. He picked up his coat from the back of his chair. No one followed him to the door. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. He inhaled deeply. The city lights blurred slightly as he walked to his car. Inside, he sat for a full minute before turning the key. His reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than it had that morning. He drove home in silence. No music, no phone calls. The city passed by in streaks of red and white. At a red light, he realized his hands were steady again. When he reached the apartment, he parked carefully in his usual spot. He unlocked the door. The living room greeted him with familiar stillness. The piano against the wall, framed photos on the shelf, soft lamp in the corner. He did not turn on the lights. He removed his jacket and placed it over the back of a chair. He sat down slowly on the couch. The dark wrapped around him. He stared at nothing. No anger rose. No tears fell. Only a quiet, cold clarity. Something inside him shut off. Chapter 5: The Inventory. Ricardo did not sleep. The apartment remained dark except for the faint orange glow of street lights leaking through the curtains. He sat on the couch until the early hours of the morning, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together. His mind did not race. It did not spiral. It organized. At 4:12 a.m., he stood up. The silence felt different now. No longer comforting, no longer heavy. Just neutral. He walked slowly through the living room. The piano stood against the wall where it had always been. He ran his fingers lightly across the top. A thin layer of dust clung to the surface. Letitia hadn't played it in years. The framed photographs remained on the shelf. Recitals, vacations, birthdays. He picked one up, Letitia at 12, missing front teeth, holding up a handmade card. Happy Father's Day. It read in uneven letters. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he placed it back exactly where it had been. He moved to the hallway. The apartment was quiet in the way homes are before the rest of the family returns, suspended between moments. Marta and Letitia had stayed the night at a relative's house after the dinner. He had not asked. They had not told. He entered the kitchen and turned on the small light above the stove. The table was where he always paid the bills. He opened the drawer. Inside were folders neatly labeled: mortgage, utilities, insurance, car, credit cards. He took them out one by one and laid them across the table. The deed, his name, the mortgage, his name, the homeowner's insurance, his name, electricity, his name, water, his name, internet, his name. He pulled out his wallet and removed a credit card, then another, all issued under his account. He walked to the entryway and picked up the car keys from the small ceramic bowl. Registration, his name, insurance, his name. He stood very still. There was no anger in the realization, only arithmetic. He returned to the kitchen table and sat down. For years, he had told himself he was protecting them, providing stability, ensuring security. Now the truth revealed itself plainly, without emotion. They wanted me gone. He leaned back in the chair. They just didn't understand what that meant. He folded his hands together and stared at the opposite wall. He did not feel revenge. He did not feel triumph. He felt alignment. At 8:30 a.m., he made coffee. Black, no sugar. He drank it slowly and then reached for his phone. There was one number he hadn't dialed in a long time. Roberto Alvarez. They had met years ago when Ricardo first purchased the apartment. Roberto had handled the paperwork, efficient, discreet, precise. The phone rang 3 times. Roberto speaking. Good morning, Ricardo said evenly. It's Ricardo Mendez. A pause. Ricardo, it's been a while. Everything all right? Yes. The word came easily. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Ricardo glanced at the documents spread across the table. I want to sell the apartment. Silence on the other end. That's sudden, Roberto replied carefully. Is there a reason? Yes. Another pause. Is the property solely under your name? Roberto asked. It is. No shared ownership. No mortgage current. Up to date. Any liens? Outstanding legal claims? None. Roberto exhaled lightly. Then there's no obstacle. Ricardo nodded, even though Roberto couldn't see him. Good. Are you certain? Roberto asked quietly. This is your residence. It is, Ricardo agreed. And I want to sell. No explanation followed. Roberto did not press. All right, he said. I'll prepare the paperwork and contact a realtor I trust. We can move quickly if you'd like. I would. Within weeks, then. That's fine. There was no trembling in Ricardo's voice. No bitterness. Just clarity. They ended the call in under 4 minutes. Ricardo sat there for a while after, staring at his reflection in the dark screen of his phone. The air in the apartment felt different already. Lighter. He stood up and began walking again, room by room. The master bedroom. Marta's wardrobe filled one side. Shoes neatly arranged. Dresses hung in protective covers. He opened the closet slowly. The shelf above held old storage boxes. He pulled one down and opened it. Inside were bank statements from the early years. Savings records. Spreadsheets printed and highlighted. He flipped through them. Every promotion. Every raise. Every transfer into savings for tuition. He closed the box and returned it to its place. He walked into Letitia's old room. The walls were still painted the soft shade of blue she had chosen at 14. Her shelves held forgotten trophies and framed certificates. He picked up one outstanding academic achievement. At the bottom, a handwritten note from teacher. Your dedication shows. He placed it back carefully. For a brief moment, something inside him flickered. Not regret, not doubt, memory. He let it pass. Back in the living room, he opened the balcony door. Morning air flowed in. He leaned against the railing and looked at the city below. 18 years. He had built this structure brick by brick. Not just the apartment, the life inside it. But structures built on imbalance eventually collapse. And this one had already cracked. His phone buzzed. A message from Roberto. I've spoken to a realtor. She'll contact you within the hour. Ricardo typed a simple reply. Thank you. At 9:47 a.m., the realtor called. Mr. Mendez? I understand you're interested in listing the property. Yes. She asked practical questions, square footage, upgrades, neighborhood details. He answered efficiently. The market is strong right now, she said. We can price it competitively and expect interest quickly. Listed at market value, he replied. No, emotional pricing? No. She laughed softly, assuming it was a joke. He did not. All right, she said. I'll prepare the listing and send you the draft for approval this afternoon. Do it. He ended the call. The apartment stood around him, unchanged, but no longer permanent. At 1:12 p.m., his email chimed. Subject line, property listing draft, review and approve. Ricardo opened it. Photos from a quick preliminary shoot. The living room, the kitchen, the balcony, the bedrooms. It looked like a place someone else might buy. He scrolled to the bottom. Approve listing. He did not hesitate. He clicked. A small confirmation message appeared on the screen. Your property is now live. Ricardo closed the laptop slowly and looked around the apartment one last time. No anger, no noise, only movement. The inventory was complete. Chapter 6, Disappearing Properly. The first showing happened 48 hours after the listing went live. Ricardo was at work when the realtor called. We've had strong interest, she said, her voice brisk and optimistic. 3 viewings today. One couple seems particularly serious. Good, Ricardo replied. You're not planning to be present, correct? No, he kept his tone neutral. That evening, he returned to the apartment before Marta and Letitia came home. He straightened the cushions on the couch, wiped down the kitchen counters, opened the balcony doors slightly to let fresh air in. He did it carefully, not sentimentally. He noticed Marta watching him from the hallway. Why is everything so clean? She asked lightly. There was a showing, he answered. A showing? She frowned. Of what? The apartment. She stared at him, confused. What do you mean? It's listed. The silence that followed was thin and brittle. You're joking, she said. I'm not. Marta's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that without discussing it? Ricardo met her gaze calmly. It's my property. The words were factual, not aggressive. Letitia appeared from her bedroom. What's going on? He's saying he listed the apartment. Marta snapped. Letitia blinked. You can't be serious. I am, Ricardo said. For what reason? She demanded. He looked at her steadily. You asked me to disappear. She scoffed. That was a figure of speech. He didn't respond. Marta crossed her arms. You're overreacting. No, he said quietly. I'm responding. The conversation dissolved into sharp fragments after that, but Ricardo did not raise his voice. He did not defend himself further. He simply repeated practical statements. It will sell quickly. You'll receive official notice. I've spoken with my lawyer. The more composed he remained, the more unsettled they became. Within a week, an offer arrived. $140,000. Full asking price. Cash buyer. The realtor sounded almost impressed. It's clean and fast. You won't find a better deal. Ricardo signed the preliminary agreement that afternoon. The next phase required precision. He visited the bank during his lunch break. I'd like to close the joint account, he told the clerk. She glanced at her screen. Both account holders need to be present. It's under my sole authorization, he clarified. She checked again. You're correct, she admitted. There's no secondary signature requirement. Close it, he said. Funds transferred. Account terminated. He canceled the secondary credit cards that had been issued under his account number. Is there a problem with the service? The representative asked over the phone. No, you've been a valued customer for years. I know. He removed auto payments, streaming services, subscription boxes, gym memberships, wedding planning deposits. Each cancellation email arrived quietly in his inbox. Confirmation, confirmation, confirmation. He did not rush. He documented everything. At night, Marta oscillated between anger and disbelief. You're humiliating us, she said once, pacing the kitchen. What am I supposed to tell people? The truth, Ricardo replied. And what is that? That I sold my property. Letitia avoided speaking to him directly. She stayed in her room longer. Whispered conversations echoed through the hallway. One evening, she stepped into the living room, arms folded. You're really going through with this? Yes. Where are we supposed to go? He looked at her calmly. You're adults. Her face hardened. This is cruel. He considered that word. Cruel. He remembered the engagement dinner. He felt nothing rise inside him. I disagree, he said. He found a new apartment on a quiet street across town. Smaller. One bedroom. Modest kitchen. No balcony. But the windows faced a line of trees, and sunlight filtered through in the mornings. The landlord, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, showed him around. Just you, she asked. Yes. No pets. No, you seem very calm, she remarked, studying him. I am. He signed the lease that afternoon. He moved slowly, box by box. Not everything, only what was his. His clothes, his documents, a few books, the old coffee mug he'd used for years. He left the piano. He left the furniture. He left the framed photos on the wall. He did it on a Tuesday afternoon while Marta and Letitia were out meeting a wedding vendor. No confrontation, no announcement. When they returned that evening, his closet was empty. His side of the bathroom shelf was cleared. His shoes were gone from the entryway. Marta stood in the bedroom doorway staring at the vacant space. He actually left, she whispered. Letitia walked through the apartment, opening drawers as if expecting him to reappear. He can't just walk away, she muttered. But he already had. Roberto handled the eviction filing. It's procedural, the lawyer explained. Since there's no lease agreement in their names, once ownership transfers, the new owner can request vacancy. I'll ensure everything is legal and documented. I don't want complications, Ricardo said. There won't be. When the official notice was delivered, Marta called him repeatedly. He let it ring. Then he sent one final message. All legal documentation has been filed. Please direct further communication to my lawyer. He blocked her number. Moments later, Letitia called. He watched the screen vibrate. Then he blocked hers too. Silence followed. Not dramatic silence. Clean silence. 3 weeks after listing, the closing date arrived. Ricardo sat across from the buyer in a small office with neutral-colored walls. Papers were stacked neatly in front of him. Everything looks straightforward, the notary said, sliding documents across the table. Ricardo reviewed each page carefully. Purchase agreement, transfer of deed, mortgage settlement confirmation. He signed where indicated. His signature remained steady. When a final page was completed, the notary stamped the documents with a firm, official thud. It's done, she said. The buyer extended his hand. Congratulations. Ricardo shook it. He stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The transaction receipt reflected the sale amount. $140,000. Transferred. Finalized. He felt no triumph, no bitterness, only stillness. The official change of ownership paperwork had been signed. Chapter 7. The knock at the door. The knock came at 9:17 a.m. It was not frantic, not aggressive, just firm. 3 measured raps against the wood. Marta was in the kitchen when she heard it. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, irritated. "Who is it?" she called out. No answer. Just another knock. Letitia stepped out of her bedroom, hair tied loosely back. "Are we expecting someone?" Marta shook her head and walked to the door. When she opened it, 2 men stood in the hallway. One wore a tailored blazer and carried a leather folder tucked under his arm. The other wore a sheriff's uniform. "Yes?" Marta asked, her voice cautious. "Good morning," the man in the blazer said politely. "I'm Daniel Ferreira. I'm a new owner of this property." Marta blinked. "I'm sorry," she replied. He glanced at the folder. "The sale closed 3 weeks ago. I'm here regarding possession of the apartment." The sheriff stepped forward slightly, holding out an envelope. "This is the official notice," he said. "You have 2 hours to vacate the premises." The words seemed to fall slowly into the hallway, heavy and unreal. Marta stared at the paper without taking it. "That's impossible," she said faintly. "There must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," Daniel replied calmly. "The property deed transferred legally. I've allowed the standard grace period. Today is the enforcement date." Letitia moved closer, peering over her mother's shoulder. "What is he talking about?" Marta finally took the envelope with trembling hands. She scanned the document quickly, her face draining of color. "He sold it," she whispered. Letitia's expression hardened. "Sold what?" "The apartment." Silence pressed against the walls. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'll need you to begin packing your essential belongings." "You can't just throw us out," Letitia snapped. "I'm not throwing anyone out," the sheriff replied evenly. "I'm enforcing a legal order." Marta stepped back, gripping the doorframe for support. No, he wouldn't do this. But he had. She rushed to her phone and dialed Ricardo's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. "Ricardo," she shouted into the phone. "What is happening? Call me back immediately." She hung up and tried again. Nothing. Letitia grabbed her own phone and began dialing rapidly. "Pick up," she muttered. "Pick up." Ricardo was sitting at the small kitchen table in his new apartment when his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Marta. He let it ring. Then Letitia. He watched the name flash across the screen. He felt no spike of emotion, only confirmation. The knock had arrived. His phone buzzed again, and again. Finally, a text appeared from Letitia. "What did you do?" "They're kicking us out." He set the phone down on the table. Outside his window, sunlight filtered through thin curtains. The trees moved gently in the breeze. The phone buzzed again. "We have nowhere to go." He exhaled slowly and picked up the device. He typed one sentence. "You asked me to disappear. I'm honoring your wish." He stared at the message for a moment, then pressed send. Almost immediately, her reply came. "This isn't funny. I need $5,000 for the wedding deposit, or we lose everything." Another message followed. "Please, just transfer it. We'll figure the rest out later." He read them carefully. The urgency, the assumption. He typed nothing further. Instead, he opened his contacts. Blocked. Letitia. Blocked. Marta. He placed the phone face down on the table. Silence returned. Back at the apartment, chaos unfolded. "They can't do this," Letitia shouted, pacing between rooms. "This is illegal." "It's not," the sheriff replied, maintaining distance but presence. Daniel stood near the doorway, patient but unmoving. "I've already arranged for a locksmith," he said. "Once the 2 hours expire, the locks will be changed." Marta sank onto the couch. "This is your fault," Letitia hissed suddenly, turning toward her. "You said he wouldn't actually leave." Marta looked up, stunned. "Don't start." "You nodded," Letitia said, her voice cracking. "At the dinner. You agreed with me." Marta pressed her lips together. The truth hovered between them. The sheriff checked his watch. 1 hour and 30 minutes remaining. Drawers opened violently. Suitcases were dragged from closets. Clothes stuffed in without folding. What about the furniture? Marta asked weakly. It remains with the property, Daniel said. As per sale agreement. The piano stood untouched in the living room. Letitia looked at it, eyes wide. Can we take that? It's included in the sale, Daniel replied. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. Phone calls were made frantically. Friends offered sympathy, but no spare apartments. Raphael arrived 40 minutes later, breathless. What's happening? He demanded. They sold it. Letitia said, tears streaking her cheeks. He sold everything. Raphael ran a hand through his hair. Where are you staying? I don't know. He looked around the apartment at the half-packed bags, the sheriff standing silently, the new owner waiting. This is insane, he muttered. Marta clutched her purse. Ricardo isn't answering. Raphael's expression shifted, subtle but clear. You didn't have anything in writing? He asked. Marta shook her head. He looked at Letitia, calculating something. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, he said slowly. Her head snapped toward him. What? Until things stabilize. Raphael, this is a mess, he interrupted. I can't start a marriage like this. Her face crumpled. The sheriff cleared his throat again. 30 minutes. Suitcases lined the hallway now. The apartment echoed. When the locksmith arrived, Letitia was still arguing with Raphael near the doorway. You said we were building a future, she cried. We were, he said quietly. But not like this. He stepped back. I'll call you. He didn't. 2 hours after the first knock, Marta and Letitia stood in the hallway with their luggage. The door closed behind them. The lock clicked. The life they had known ended with that sound. Ricardo learned the details gradually. Through silence. Through the absence of calls. Through the quiet confirmation from Roberto that possession had been executed smoothly. The wedding venue cancellation appeared online weeks later. A mutual acquaintance mentioned Raphael had moved out of Letitia's life just as quickly as he had entered it. Letitia took a job at a retail store near the city center. Minimum wage. Long shifts. Marta rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town. 1 bedroom. Older building. Thin walls. Ricardo did not search for photos. He did not ask questions. He did not celebrate. He sat in his new apartment one evening, a simple meal cooling on the table, and waited for a surge of emotion. Anger. Satisfaction. Vindication. None came. Only a quiet, unfamiliar lightness. He felt no joy, no revenge, just release. Chapter 8, The Lawsuit. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick, official, and stamped with a courthouse seal. Ricardo held it carefully in his hands, as if touching it might prevent reality from entering the apartment. It was from Marta's attorney. Pursuant to family law statutes, we are filing for alimony and compensation. Ricardo read the document slowly, line by line. His eyes moved over the words without flinching. No emotion rose. He had anticipated this. He had prepared for it. Every receipt, every mortgage statement, every bank transfer meticulously filed. Every cent accounted for. He called Roberto immediately. Roberto, it's coming, he said calmly. She's filing. Roberto's voice was steady. I expected as much. Don't worry. We have everything ready. You won't need to stress. Ricardo nodded, even though the lawyer could not see him. Good. Let's do this properly. The first court date arrived 2 weeks later. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. People whispered in corners. Lawyers consulted quietly in hushed tones. Ricardo sat in the back, hands folded in his lap. He didn't fidget. He didn't check his phone. He only watched. Marta entered with her attorney, her face tight, composed, but her eyes betraying panic. She paused for a moment when she saw him. You're here, she said quietly, almost accusingly. Yes, he replied simply. Her attorney, a sharply dressed woman with dark hair, pulled back into a tight bun, approached the bench first. Your Honor, my client has devoted her life emotionally to this marriage. She has depended entirely on Mr. Mendez for financial and domestic support. It is only fair that compensation and alimony be awarded. The words were measured, rehearsed. a plea dressed in legal language. But Ricardo listened without reaction. Roberto stood and presented his side. Your Honor, the property in question is solely owned by my client. The mortgage, the insurance, and all associated debts have been paid by him. The joint accounts have been closed properly. There are no shared assets. My client has fulfilled all legal obligations and has extended nothing beyond what is required by law. Documents were passed across the bench. Receipts, bank statements, payment confirmations, photographs of invoices for the apartment, the piano, Letitia's tuition, medical bills, utilities. Everything meticulously labeled. The judge, an older man with keen eyes and a calm demeanor, leaned back in his chair. He reviewed each document carefully. Ms. Alvarez, he addressed Marta's attorney. Do you have evidence of joint ownership or any shared asset that would warrant compensation? The attorney faltered slightly. Your Honor, the argument is not based solely on property ownership. It is based on emotional dependency and contribution to household stability. The judge raised an eyebrow. While I acknowledge emotional bonds and domestic contributions, the law requires tangible evidence of financial claim. The records presented by Mr. Mendez counsel indicate there are no shared assets, no co-signed property, and no outstanding obligations. Without such evidence, the claim is unsupported. Marta's face flushed. She opened her mouth, but her attorney placed a hand gently on her arm. Ricardo watched silently. He didn't flinch at her expression. The courtroom noises, chairs scraping, papers shuffling, faded in a background hum. Your Honor, Roberto added, the plaintiff has not established legal grounds for compensation. We ask that the case be dismissed and for any further claims to be formally denied. The judge nodded, reviewing the paperwork once more. Very well. The claim for alimony and compensation is dismissed. There will be no award. A hush fell over the courtroom. Marta's lips pressed into a thin line. Letitia, who had accompanied her mother, shifted uncomfortably. She avoided Ricardo's gaze. Ricardo remained composed. No smile, no glance of triumph, just calm observation. The courtroom seemed to recognize his stillness as unshakable. Over the next few days, Roberto filed for divorce. Clean break, he said firmly. No settlement, no negotiation. The legal separation will be straightforward. Ricardo nodded. I want it final, complete, without complication. Divorce papers were drawn, signed, and notarized. Each signature precise, measured. No flourish, no drama. Marta tried to argue during one meeting at the courthouse. You can't just erase everything. We were married for years. Roberto interrupted gently but firmly. The legal system recognizes ownership and contribution. Mr. Mendez has fulfilled his obligations fully. There is nothing further. Marta's protests dwindled. She realized the process was not about shouting or manipulation. It was about facts, the cold arithmetic of law. Letitia hovered nearby, her arms crossed. So that's it? She asked softly. Yes, Ricardo said. It's over. No celebration followed. No gloating. Just the sound of papers being stamped, signatures hitting the page, and the quiet exhale of a man who had finally set boundaries. When the divorce was finalized, Ricardo held the papers in his hands. He read through them carefully. No clauses left unchecked. No lingering obligations. He placed them gently on the kitchen counter of his small apartment. For the first time in decades, the life he had built for others had been legally severed from him. Marta left the courthouse silently, dragging Letitia behind her. Neither looked back. Neither said a word. Ricardo stood by the window later that evening, hands resting on the sill. Outside, the city moved along as usual. Cars, buses, pedestrians, oblivious to the finality of one man's decision to step away. He did not feel triumph. He did not feel anger. He did not long for revenge. He only felt clarity, years of devotion, years of giving, and now, a complete, irrevocable severing. The apartment, the finances, the constant demands gone. The lawsuit had failed. The divorce was finalized. And Ricardo, for the first time in decades, was free of any legal or emotional tether to the woman who had smiled while she watched him be discarded, and to the daughter who had treated his devotion as entitlement. He folded the divorce papers neatly, placed them in a drawer, locked it. No settlement, no apology, no closure for Marta. Just the unassailable, quiet truth of a clean break. Chapter 9, Learning Silence. The apartment was quiet in a way Ricardo had never known. Not the sterile quiet of absence, not the heavy quiet of obligation unmet, but a gentle, breathing silence. The walls no longer carried whispers or arguments. The air no longer held tension or expectation. It was empty, yes, but in that emptiness, Ricardo found space. He began small. Morning coffee without the rush of packing lunches or coordinating schedules. Black, just the way he liked it. He watched the sunlight spill across the counter, dust motes floating lazily in the light. He let the silence fill him, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. That afternoon, he opened the cupboard and pulled out pots and pans he hadn't touched in years. Cooking had once been a luxury squeezed between errands, bills, and birthday preparations. Now, he chopped vegetables deliberately, sliced onions without worry about a child asking why they smelled, stirred sauces without calculating calories for someone else. The kitchen smelled of garlic and rosemary. Steam rose from the pan in soft swirls. Ricardo tasted a piece of roasted chicken and smiled faintly. It was perfectly seasoned. He didn't have to share it. He didn't have to hide it. It was just his. After dinner, he moved to the piano in the corner. Dust covered the keys, but his fingers remembered the shape of each note, the familiar rhythm of scales practiced so many years ago. He played softly at first, a simple melody that let the muscles remember what the mind had forgotten. Then louder, notes spilling into the room, filling every corner, echoing off bare walls. He didn't care about Letitia's praise or Marta's approval. He didn't care if anyone heard. It was just music. For him. Some mornings, he walked in the park near his new apartment. Trees lined the path, sunlight flickering through branches. Joggers passed. Children played. Couples strolled. He watched without envy or expectation. No one called his name. No one asked for his time. He breathed deeply, letting the city's rhythm settle into him. His shoulders, once tight with responsibility, loosened. Each step felt lighter, more deliberate. He began talking to neighbors. Small exchanges at first. A nod in the hallway, a greeting by the mailboxes, a question about the weather. Then longer conversations, laughter shared with people who had no expectations beyond civility. One afternoon, an elderly neighbor knocked on his door with a plate of cookies. "I baked too many," she said, smiling. "Thought you might enjoy some." Ricardo accepted the cookies gratefully. "Thank you. That's very kind." They sat and talked about small things, the flowers in the courtyard, a new cafe opening down the street, the park's weekend events. No drama, no hierarchy, no emotional debt. Just conversation. At night, sleep came differently now. No worrying about bills being paid on time. No imagining hypothetical emergencies. No counting someone else's mistakes. He drifted into rest and stayed there, uninterrupted. For the first time in years, he awoke refreshed, with energy not burdened by the needs of others. One evening, sitting by the window with the city lights flickering like distant stars, Ricardo reflected quietly. The apartment around him was modest, yet warm. His belongings were few, personal. He realized that for nearly 2 decades, he had been trapped in a role he had accepted willingly, yet never truly lived for himself. "I wasn't a husband," he thought, tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I wasn't a father. I was a provider." Every sacrifice he had made, every penny spent, every hour worked, had been for the sake of others, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of hope for gratitude that never came. And now, without the need to satisfy anyone, without the weight of expectation, he felt this subtle shift in his being. The piano music echoed faintly in the background as he hummed along softly. He thought about the long walks he'd taken in the park that week, the meals he had cooked for no one, the quiet smiles shared with neighbors, the unhurried afternoons reading novels he had once abandoned. There were no arguments now, no questions about where money was coming from, no disapproving glances at what he had chosen for himself. Freedom was not loud or grand. It was subtle. It settled in his chest, in his limbs, in the small choices of daily life. He found himself laughing quietly at a minor mishap in the kitchen, a pot tipping slightly, spilling sauce, but without shame, without a need to apologize. The sound startled him at first. He hadn't realized he had forgotten how to laugh alone, without explanation, without audience. The days blended gently into one another. He found pleasure in details. The way light hit the window in the morning, the creak of the floorboard when he moved across the apartment, the smell of fresh bread baking in the nearby bakery. Life, in its simplest form, had returned. Ricardo noticed his reflection in the hallway mirror one morning. He studied the face of the man who had carried others' burdens for so long. The lines were sharper, yes, but the eyes were lighter. There was a calm that had been absent for decades. He nodded subtly to himself. He began to plan again, not for Letitia, not for Marta, not for anyone but himself. Small goals: perfecting a risotto recipe, learning a new piano piece, attending a concert at the local hall. Maybe a weekend hiking trip. Nothing grand, nothing to impress, nothing to prove. In these quiet moments, he realized he had been alive in fragments before. Each act of giving, each sacrifice had been life, yes, but it had been life through the lens of someone else's need. Now, for the first time, he could see the whole. He watched a young couple pass in the courtyard below, holding hands. He smiled softly to himself. There was no envy, no judgment, just observation. Life went on. He could exist alongside it without being consumed by it. As he strummed a soft chord on the piano, he whispered to himself, "I'm simply a man again." It was a statement of fact, not of triumph, not of defiance, just truth. For the first time in years, Ricardo felt light. Light enough to breathe, light enough to laugh, light enough to simply be. Chapter 10, The Coffee Shop. The message appeared on his phone one Tuesday morning, 2 months after the final eviction. A new number, unfamiliar but deliberate. "Can we meet? I need to talk." Ricardo stared at it for a long moment. He did not respond immediately. 2 months of silence had been quiet but restorative. He had grown accustomed to the absence of demands, the lack of interruptions, the simple rhythm of his own life. Yet curiosity, tempered by careful caution, nudged him. He replied simply, "Where?" "The Corner Bean, 11 a.m. tomorrow." He agreed. The next day, the coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries. The soft murmur of conversation filled the small space, punctuated by the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. Ricardo arrived early. He chose a table near the window, sunlight catching his hair, casting thin lines of shadow across the tabletop. He ordered a black coffee. He did not fidget. He did not pace. He waited. When she walked in, he recognized her instantly. Letitia looked smaller somehow, more fragile than he remembered. Her shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight she had carried for years had finally pressed down and left its mark. Her hair was pulled back loosely. Her clothes were simple. Tired eyes met his briefly before she looked away. She approached slowly. "Hi," she said softly. Ricardo nodded. "Hi." She sat down, hands clasped around a cup of tea. Silence hung for a few moments, polite but charged. I wanted to apologize," she said finally. Her voice was low, unsteady. "For everything. For how I treated you. For the words I said that night." She trailed off, eyes glistening. Ricardo remained silent, listening. He did not interrupt. "I was resentful," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't understand, or maybe I didn't want to understand. I saw everything through anger, through jealousy. I made you the enemy because I didn't want to face the truth about myself." He nodded slightly, letting her continue. "Raphael," her lips tightened. "He only valued money. I ignored it because I thought I could keep my life the way I wanted. I pushed everyone away, especially you." Ricardo sipped his coffee. No judgment, no reaction beyond attentive silence. "I've been in therapy," she said, a brief but steady confession. "Learning to face my own mistakes, my own entitlement, my own fear. And I realized that you were the only stable father figure I ever had. Not because of gifts or money, but because you were consistent, reliable, present, even when I didn't deserve it. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Her hands trembled slightly around the cup. I take full responsibility. No excuses. No blaming anyone else. The words hung in the warm air between them. Ricardo's chest remained calm. His mind cataloged each syllable, each admission, each sign of growth. I don't ask for anything, Letitia said finally. I wanted to say it. To tell you I see it now. I see you. I see what you did, what you gave, and I'm sorry. Ricardo placed his cup down carefully. He did not reach across the table. He did not hug her. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he studied her face. The tired eyes, the softened expression, the weight lifted slightly by the courage to admit fault. He noted the absence of demands. No guilt tripping. No pleas. No attempt to reclaim what she had lost. And he saw growth. I hear you, he said finally, his voice steady. Thank you for saying that. She nodded, a fragile but genuine smile forming. Relief flickered across her features. They spoke quietly after that, but only for a few minutes. About everyday things. About small neutral topics. The cafe, the weather, the park nearby. Nothing personal beyond the acknowledgement already given. Ricardo's role was not to correct, guide, or advise. He was simply present. Eventually, Letitia glanced at her watch. I should go, she said softly. Ricardo nodded. Of course. They stood. She hesitated for a moment, then offered a brief, respectful nod. He returned it with the same calm dignity. No embrace. No lingering. Just acknowledgement. Outside the cafe, sunlight streamed across the street. Ricardo walked slowly, savoring the light, the air, the absence of obligation. He did not look back. He did not need to. As he moved along the sidewalk, his thoughts settled into clarity, simple and unshakable. I didn't destroy them. I stopped carrying them. And when I let go, they fell. But I finally stood. Ricardo took a deep breath. The city hummed around him. Life moved forward, indifferent to the past. And for the first time in years, he felt complete. Light, free, whole. No burden of loyalty. No shadow of betrayal. Only the quiet strength of a man who had lived, given, and survived. The finality of the moment was not dramatic. There were no celebrations, no applause, no triumphs to announce. There was only calm. And that, he realized, was enough. He glanced once at the cafe behind him, where Letitia had disappeared inside to finish her tea, then turned his gaze to the street ahead. He walked on, step by step, in the sunlight, feeling the invisible weight lift entirely from his shoulders. For the first time, he was simply Ricardo. Free, whole, at peace.